Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you in the world are attending. Thank you for being here. I hope you are all safe and well. Since I first decided on the name of the webinar 2 months ago, there have been some changes. And most important change when I decided on the name is that there's now a new extra thing that was just introduced called EtherCAT to the Atlas capabilities. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. And our seminar is an introduction to Atlas permanent monitoring solution for Ethernet IP, EtherCAT, and Profinet. Well, we'll get started. Thanks again for joining the webinar. A little bit about me. I'm Rick Rockershausen, VP of Sales here at Grid Connect. There's my contact information. I've been working in the industry for over 15 years, a lot of it working in Profibus world as a trainer and troubleshooter. I also have spent a good amount of time working with industrial Ethernet networks like Profinet, Ethernet IP in particular. And I'm an engineer by training. A little bit about Grid Connect. Grid Connect started in 2003 as a distributor manufacturer of industrial networking products. We're still hard at it. And one of our vendor partners, one of our most important vendor partners is Procentec. And we are what's known as a master partner with Procentec. What that means is that we have reached the highest level of sales support and expertise in their products. Another little bit about Grid Connect. We have other partners, as I mentioned, who also work in the industrial Ethernet space. We have Deutschmann Automation and Schildknecht in particular have a lot of Profinet offerings, and some of the others as well would have things that are relevant to our discussion today. Okay, so on to Atlas. What you see there is the Atlas from Procentec, and today we're going to talk about it. We're going to have an overview. We'll talk about the hardware, the features and options. So there's some extra goodies that can work with Atlas to do even more stuff, and we'll talk about those things. We'll also talk about the software that runs on Atlas called Osiris. We'll spend a few minutes on describing what we mean by passive and active monitoring. We'll talk about where to position Atlas on your industrial network. And then we'll get into a demo of what Atlas can do, a sort of a live demo, and we'll have Q&A. Now, if you have questions throughout as we're going along here, you can hit the Q&A link on the bottom. We have a few folks standing by to answer your questions. So if you go to the bottom of your webinar window and mouse over there, you should see a Q&A pop up. If you have a question, you can just type it in. We'll either answer it in the chat there, or we will answer it on the air at the end. And also, I just wanted to point out that we will be recording the webinar today. So if you need to drop off, I know it's a busy time of year for folks. If you need to drop off, don't worry, we'll have a recording ready for you to watch at a later date. With that, let's move on into it. What is Atlas? Well, on a high level, it provides 24/7 monitoring and diagnostics for industrial networks, industrial Ethernet networks. It has this Osiris software that you've already heard me mention. And I like to say it's protocol aware for these industrial Ethernet protocols. I didn't mention Modbus TCP in the title, but it's also there in Atlas. And it does a lot of important measuring and monitoring of statistics about the health of your network, including jitter, link loads, cycle time, et cetera there. And another great thing that's provided is a network topology. If you've ever done any troubleshooting on an industrial network, you know having a drawing is super important, and the Atlas will create a drawing for you, including which port numbers are connected to which port numbers between switches and devices, so you can follow those cables. And Atlas also has a unique feature of being able to identify unmanaged switches in your network. So if the switch does not support SNMP, for example, Atlas will still know there's a switch in there. Won't know a lot of details about it, but at least you'll be able to see where it is in your network. And there's another feature called the device list, which is a list of all the devices within your network. And in that device list, there are things like firmware rev and hardware rev. So if you have two devices that are not on the same firmware, for example, you'll get a warning, and you can make sure you get them both to the same level so that everything is up to date in your network. There's also a commissioning wizard feature that uses the specs that were developed for Profinet by the PI organization, Profibus, Profinet International. And then the trade organization for Ethernet IP is called ODVA, Open Device Vendors Association. And those two organizations have standards about how Ethernet IP and Profinet networks should be designed and set up. And the commissioning wizard will kind of watch your network. It's great for commissioning, of course, but also as things change over time, the commissioning wizard can help you understand what has changed and whether you're still within spec. There's a reporting feature, so you can generate PDF reports about the health of your network and save those away and maybe compare things over time as that happens. And like any good monitoring system, Atlas can alert you to changes or problems within your network and alert you via email, via the relay that's on the front of the hardware, which I'll show you in a moment, and also using OPC UA or MQTT. Okay, so here's the Atlas hardware. Everything you need to that the working part of the Atlas hardware is all on the face of the unit. So you see there's two Ethernet ports. I'll use my mouse a little bit here. So there's the bottom port is what's called the factory port. That's connected to your industrial Ethernet network. And the port on top is called the office port. That's the port that's not connected to your factory network, whether it's your IT network or something else. The point is that they're separate networks and there's no message traffic that goes between these two ports. It's not a switch. It's not, just for daisy chaining. The factory port connects and monitors the factory network, and the Ethernet 1 here, the office port, allows you to get in and see what is going on and view the monitoring of the factory network. There's also some on the front, there's some LEDs for status for the network and power, etc. There's this relay I mentioned for alerting, and there are a couple of USB ports, which we'll get into later, and there's also an SD card slot. But EtherCAT is not the only new thing announced recently by Procentec. There's also Atlas 2 hardware, so that's pretty exciting. It's got all the same physical connections on the front as the original Atlas. They've just made the factory port and office port side by side instead of one over the other. Here's our two USB ports. There's the relay and power, of course. And there's an optional OLED screen that goes at the top. You can see a little image here of what might be displayed on the OLED screen, like your network name, your uptime, this little traffic light, whether your network is good or not. So you can visually just look at the Atlas and know whether you need to get in and take a look at what's happening with the diagnostic software running. It can also provide you information about the IP addresses of the two interfaces, for example. So we're kind of excited about that little extra goodie there. If you don't get the OLED screen, it's optional, as I mentioned. Behind where the screen mounts are the status LEDs. So you don't lose the regular LEDs, but the OLED just covers them up because it takes the place of them in this case. What's great about the new Atlas is that it's super high performance. It's got the latest ARM processors, more memory, and runs the same software as the standard Osiris software as the standard Atlas. But Procentec has a lot of goodies in the roadmap, and they're trying to make sure that the Atlas doesn't run out of steam as they keep adding features here going forward. So if you want to future-proof your purchase, you might want to consider an Atlas 2 rather than the standard Atlas because lots more good stuff is on the way from Procentec, to be sure. Before I go too much further, I just wanted to spend a moment talking about switches. I know it's boring, but if you attended my Profibus webinar back in September, you may have heard me say something like, in Profibus, messages go everywhere. What I meant by that is that every device on the Profibus network sees every message from every other device. That's not the case in the Ethernet world. Messages do not go everywhere. Switches are smart, and so they only send messages down links that they know where the sender or the receiver resides. So for example, if device X down here on port 2 sends a message to the controller, it's going to come up port 2 and go out port 1 to the controller, and the response will go back the same way. Those two messages from the controller to the device and the response don't go out any other port on this switch. They don't go out any other link. The only place they live is on these two links. And the same could be said over here. Now we have a different sort of configuration here where we daisy chain. Now this daisy chain is not like a Profibus daisy chain. There's actually a little 2-port switch in a lot of devices where you can switch down to the next device. So really there's a second switch right here. But in this case, if device Z were to send a message to the controller, it would come in through port 4 and out 1 and back. I know it might seem obvious. It might seem everyone knows this, but I just wanted to get everyone on the same page. So I mentioned there's some other goodies that can go along with the Atlas, and one of the most important ones is this thing called the Ether Tap. And let me just talk about what the Ether Tap is real quick. So for example, if you were going to do, let's look at these two examples, the before and after down here. If you had a controller and a switch and you wanted to capture traffic to and from this controller, the old traditional way is to go into the switch, if it's a managed switch, and create a mirror port or a monitor port. And then you'd have to, assign your laptop to an IP address where you could get into the switch. You have to find an open port. You have to connect your laptop there using the IP address. You're going to use up your network interface here on the laptop. So if you needed to connect to the outside world, you might not have an interface to do that. And then, running Wireshark is what a lot of folks did prior to Atlas and still do, of course. Wireshark is a program for analyzing Ethernet packets. It's used a lot in the IT world. In the industrial world where things are critical to keep up and running, uptime is money. Wireshark message dumps can be rather huge and take hours and hours of analysis to go through to try to figure things out. But nonetheless, if you want to run Wireshark, this is how you had to do it. What this new product called the Ether Tap, well, it's not so new, it's been around for a while, does is basically it goes between the switch and the controller, and you come into the Ether Tap and out, and then there is a USB link over to your laptop. So you don't have to go through all the hassle of setting up an IP address on your laptop or finding what IP address to use. Of course, if I were going to walk up to this network and install this Ether Tap, I would have to unplug this cable from the controller to the switch. So there is this interruption that would happen the first time you install it. But if you leave it installed, you do it once when you had downtime, and then you're ready to go when you want to do some analysis. Okay? So if you wanted to run Wireshark, of course, here today, we're here to talk about Atlas. And so Atlas does a lot of that analysis for you. And it's a great way to permanently set up to capture those data packets and let Atlas do this stuff for you. All right, so you've heard me mention this Osiris software stuff. That's really the brains or the good stuff that Atlas does for you is through Osiris software. So this software is obviously used for monitoring and diagnosing industrial Ethernet networks, and it's offered on Atlas, of course, but there's also a product called Mercury, which is a portable tablet, which we'll talk about in a moment, that also runs the same software. And then you can also get Osiris as a service, which means you can put it on a PC or a laptop or a server and run it. There's a license involved, a yearly fee, and so on. If you're interested in Osiris as a service or with Mercury, please reach out to your Grid Connect sales team. We'll be happy to help you with that. So Osiris has lots of great stuff to help with your networks, and I touched on a few of these earlier. There's the traffic light. There's a quality factor score. The quality factor score is just how good does Osiris rate your network. This is important a lot for automotive companies. They like these quality factors. There's also the device list, which I mentioned, which is a list of every device active on the network. There's the topology I also mentioned earlier. There's this link list, which tells you which link of a switch port is connected to which link of a device and so on. There are the two features I mentioned, the commissioning wizard, which does the analysis of your network to be within spec. And then the Ether Tap, which uses the message capture that we were just showing with the Ether Tap hardware. There's Ether Tap software in Osiris, and that works for Profinet, Ethernet IP, and now EtherCAT. There's also this OPC UA and MQTT connectivity for getting the data that Osiris is capturing upstream to higher level applications in the cloud or SCADA, et cetera. And as I mentioned, the new stuff, the EtherCAT, but there's also really exciting thing if you're into Profibus too, this Combricks snap analysis. If I have a chance, I'll show you that during our demo. And then there's the Osiris Enterprise, which is a way to, from a single software app, to view all of your Atlas devices within the whole enterprise from a single screen. And so if any Atlas shows a problem, you can drill in from this dashboard screen of all your Atlas devices and find what's going on with your enterprise. I won't be talking about the Osiris Enterprise any more than that today, but maybe it's a topic for a future webinar. Just to give you a quick view of what the Osiris dashboard looks like, you have these tiles that have all the different features available, and we'll get into that during the demo. I just wanted to kind of give you a little teaser here of how that looks in case you haven't seen it before. All right, so I've mentioned this active and passive monitoring a little bit. I wanted to spend a second and tell you about that. So the Osiris software uses a couple techniques to gather information. There's the active monitoring and passive monitoring. Active monitoring is when the Atlas and Osiris software sends messages out on the network to gather information. And there's a variety of protocols it uses. There's some that are standard. SNMP is the big one, of course, but there's like DCP is particular to Profinet. IGMP is used when we're doing Ethernet IP networks, et cetera. So there's a bunch of different protocols. I'm not going to get into them. But Atlas, the idea is that Atlas is sending messages out on the network to get information and present it to you about the health of your network. These messages, not to be alarmed, are very small in size typically, and they're very spaced out. It will have negligible impact on your network load. By negligible, it's less than 1%. So it's really light traffic generated by the Atlas during active monitoring. And active monitoring is used to do the things like the topology and device list and show you some of the network measurements, cycle times, and things like that. And so you can also say which addresses you want the Atlas to scan or send messages out to. There's a concept of a scan list. So it's basically an IP address range that you can set up in the Atlas to tell it where you want it to do active monitoring. On the passive side, Atlas captures the network traffic for analysis. It doesn't send messages on the network when passive monitoring. The message capture, so it can grab packets and save them for you, can be based on events. And those messages that you capture can be downloaded and used with Wireshark. So passive monitoring, active monitoring, two sides of Atlas, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. All right, so I did also talk about Osiris being available on the Mercury. So Atlas obviously is our permanent monitoring solution. It's meant to be installed permanently on the network, 24/7, watching your network. We usually have one Atlas per subnet. There are cases where you might go more than one, and we'll talk about that. And it's, if you're going to invest in Atlas, obviously it's going to be an important network for you if you're going to make that investment. There's also the portable tool, which is the Mercury. It's a tablet. This is the 7-inch Mercury shown in this picture. There's also a 10-inch version, and it's a cost-saving alternative if you don't want to put Atlas everywhere. You can use the portable Mercury and go around and do measurements, but there's a caveat there. Mercury can only measure the network while it's connected. If you're not having it connected, you don't know what's happened before you connected the Mercury or after you take it away. It only tells you what's happened while it's connected. Obvious, I know. Getting connected to an open port, as we talked about earlier, is also a challenge. So portable tools, you have to, get IP addresses and connect to open ports on a switch, and sometimes create monitor ports if you're going to do passive monitoring and all that stuff. So you may have to do disruption. Now, there's a way where you can kind of prepare for a network using a portable tool and not have to invest in an Atlas. And this is the other hardware goodie I wanted to mention today. It's called the Ether Mirror. The Ether Mirror is this device up here in the corner, and it has 2 network ports and 2 monitor ports. The idea, again, is if you wanted to install this Ether tap, you would have to disconnect this cable from the switch in order to insert the tap and then connect your Mercury. Well, the Ether Mirror is meant to be permanently installed on your network, and it has that link between the switch and the controller. And then out the monitor ports, you can come in with your Mercury and Ether tap and do your passive data collection there. If you were to lose power on this Mercury, I know you're on an important link here because you're between the controller and the switch. It does not interrupt traffic. If you lose power, it just means the monitor ports stop working. However, I have the little asterisk there. If it's a 1 gig version, you see there's a 10100 and 1 gig version. If you do lose power on the 1 gig version, there's a very quick, less than a second interruption of network traffic on the Ether Mirror. But there is, obviously power in your industrial space is not a big frequent thing that happens, but just wanted you to be aware of that. So I just wanted to explain how the Ether Mirror works real quick in terms of how the data flow goes. So if this is the network ports here. So in blue, if a telegram comes in on port B, it's going to go out port A and be mirrored over to the monitor port B. And similarly, if a message comes in on mirror port A, on network port A, it's going to go out network port B and also be mirrored out. So these are one-way traffic from coming into the B port and coming into the A port. That's what's showing up on the monitor ports. So it's not a combined link. It's got them separate. All right, so where do you put Atlas on your network? Well, let's take this simple diagram here. We have a controller, 3 devices. We have a switch. I'm calling it the OT switch for operations technology switch, or your factory switch, whatever you want to call it. And then we have our IT switch over here on the other side. So essentially for active monitoring, I need to connect Atlas to a port so it can send messages out. So we have to find a spot on this OT switch to connect our Atlas. And we want to give it an IP address that's open in your factory network. On the IT side, you come in, to your IT switch, and this could be a different IP address. It has to be a different IP address, and available for you to view the status of the factory network over the office port. There's also the option, some companies don't connect this to IT network. The factory folks just want a place to come plug in their laptop and view what's going on with the factory network. So in this case, all you would have to do is set your laptop to the address, to the subnet of the office port that's already there. And you can just plug in your laptop and direct connect and check out the network. Now, if we want to do the passive monitoring along with the active monitoring, we need to get our Ether tap in there. And so here's a depiction where we put it between the switch and the controller, just like you saw earlier. And then we run a USB cable into the Atlas. So now we can gather our network traffic that goes between the devices and the controller. That's why you want this controller link, because if you need to capture all of the traffic about this controller, it comes through this link to and from. Now let's talk about a little bit trickier situation. We have a complex network here, and we have, instead of one controller, I have 3 controllers. And instead of one switch, I got a bunch of switches, and I've got line architecture where we daisy chain devices through their 2-port switches. And we have an HMI over here and, some other switches and so on. So if we want to do active monitoring on this network, all you really need to do, again, is to connect an Atlas to an open switch port. That's really all there is to it. Now that you're attached to the switch port, you can scan this entire factory network, and you set up the scan ranges, and away you go. Nothing different than a simple network. Just find a port and get an IP address assigned and plug it in. If you wanted to do passive monitoring, I have 3 controllers. So traffic from devices to this controller does not go through this link to this controller. So essentially, you'd want to tap any traffic coming to and from each controller on your network. If you have a multi-controller network, you would need an Ether tap and Atlas to gather that information for each controller. And the HMI often speaks the same language, or same protocol, I should say, as the rest of the network. So the HMI might be, again, like a controller on the Profinet network in this case. And then we can connect our Atlases to the switch ports. But, now all these Atlases, if you set them all up with the same scan range, are all scanning the same network actively. So you might not want to do that. You might just leave it to one Atlas, and you don't necessarily need to have these connected to a switch port, because they'll be all scanning the same network, and you'll have 4 times the traffic that you otherwise would have. Again, it's low traffic, so it's okay. Or you might want to come in and change the scan range of this Atlas to only scan the devices used by this controller, and change the scan range on this Atlas, if you left this active one in, to scan those devices, etc. So it's up to you how you do that. It depends on your network. Just wanted to point out that it's not necessarily necessary to connect active monitoring for all of your Atlases on the same factory network. Okay, and then other stuff happens in factory networks, like you have other traffic, not just the traffic between controller and devices. You might have a vision system and an engineering workstation over here, working with the devices connected over Ethernet. You might have someone come in with a laptop and plug it into your network and do something, and you don't know what they did. Without Atlas, you would never know this laptop got connected. Without Atlas, you wouldn't know that this vision system is really congesting the links between it and this engineering workstation. Without it, you wouldn't know if your jitter or delays are getting to be a problem. If you go through more than 7 switches between controller and device, that can affect your update time. There's lots of stuff going on. And HMI panels don't always talk just the protocol that they're of the network they're attached to. They often do a lot of other unknown, traffic. So the impacts of those are really unknown unless you have an Atlas kind of checking it out for you. All right. So what I wanted to walk through before we get into the demo is just an idea. I mentioned if someone came up with a laptop and connected it to your network, what might that look like? Well, what you see here in this screen is this is what the device list looks like in the Atlas, and we'll see it live in a second. But for purposes of this quick demonstration here, we have 5 devices in the list. 3 of them are talking Profinet. We have a managed switch here from Contemporary Controls. We have an Atlas. So those are our devices. And if someone walks up, and so this is what our little topology would look like: our switch, our 3 devices, and our Atlas. If someone were to walk up with a laptop, it might show up here at address 20. Here's our new thing. It's online. We don't know what protocol it is because it's just a laptop connected up there. So in the topology, it would show up like this. So you can see here, it just gives you a Ethernet port, something connected Ethernet to this network. And over here, you can see, well, it was my Apple laptop. This is the IP address I gave it. It's on the network. So you can, for example, understand when someone connects an external device to your network. Okay, that's great. But what if they came in and did it and then left? Now, how do you find that out? After the laptop leaves, you'll get an indication that a device was in the network and now it's gone, or lost, as they call it here. And if you look at your topology, you'll see that it was gone here. So it gives you a good record of these external devices connecting to your factory network. But you might also want to know what time was that laptop attached or removed. And if you click on this little alerting notification bell up in the upper right corner, and I'll show you that here, it'll tell you what time this device was lost. So in this case, it was lost at 05:43 seconds. So anyway, we have a timestamp now of when this device got unplugged from our network. So it's just another little goodie that's kind of hidden in Atlas that I wanted to show you before we get into the demo, but I'm going to get into that now. So here's the dashboard of a live running Atlas. This is running over in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam time zone, at Procentec headquarters in Rotterdam, I believe it is now. And so this is showing all the tiles in the dashboard, and I'm going to kind of dive into a few of these just to show you. So we mentioned the topology, so I'm going to bring up the topology of this network in the Netherlands so you can have a look. So right now, this topology is shown to you in what they call tree view, and you can see here's our Atlas at the top of the view. You can change which device you put at the top. And it tells me, for example, that on this switch right here, port 3 of this switch is connected to port 1 of this switch. You can see the little numbers. Maybe you can't see it on your screen. I don't know if I don't think I can blow this up, but you get the idea. You can see which ports are connected to which. So you can follow those cables and see who's connected where and get a good idea of your network. There's also a view called the Galaxy view, which I kind of where it kind of shows it in a star location, and you can arrange these units and put them where you like them, and then save that view however you want to arrange your galaxy of devices. So this is the quick topology. Now, if I click on a device like I did here, it will give me the details. Like you can see here, what is the model, the vendor, what's the MAC address, the IP address, how it's online, how long has it been up. And the new feature they just added in the last month is this add a note. So I can make notes about whatever device I'm on here. And if I want to add one, I can decide what kind of a note is it going to be. Is it just information about the device? Is it a warning? Is it a bug with problem with the device? Is there something environmental going on around the device? So you can categorize the notes by type. You can say who left the note and just leave it there. And if someone is looking at this network and notices there's a problem, they can see that there's notes in the system about it. So that's kind of a nice little place to keep everything here in your Atlas. It also tells you the port information about the port on the Atlas. Of course, there's only one port connected to the factory network, which is port 1. See here. We'll go back to the dashboard. The Q factor, I'm not going to spend much time on it. It's not super interesting when everything is green, which it is in this case. So right now we have a really nice network. It's all green. They have 2 ways of measuring the quality score. You can do the automotive scoring system, which is 0 to 5,000, or you can just say on a percentage level, I have a 100% good network here. I don't know if there's anything that's going to show up on the worst. We'll see. No, it's just been a nice running network since they plugged it in. All right, onto the device list. So this is something I mentioned earlier, and you saw a few screenshots during the webinar presentation, the PowerPoint presentation. So here's all my devices. You can see the protocols here, the addresses, the MAC IP and MAC addresses, how long they've been up, their current status, and you can see what protocol they are working with. So Profinet, Modbus TCP. The unknown ones tend to be managed switches, because managed switches aren't sending out Profinet packets on their own or Ethernet IP packets on their own. They're just switching packets, right? And we also see down here the Combricks, which is interesting. This is what we were talking about, bringing Profibus stuff into your Atlas for further analysis. And I'll spend a minute on this here. So I'll talk about that in a moment. Let's let's take a quick look here at the Ether tab. So this is the passive monitoring. So here you can pick which protocol you want to look at with your Ether tab. There were no Ethernet IP devices on this network, as you saw. And then we also have regular Ethernet, but with Profinet analysis, here's what's happening. I can go to alarms, which is this page. If there were any Profinet alarms, they would show up here. You would see which device had the alarm. You can sort the alarms by manufacturer, whether it's a physical alarm or what type of alarm is it. And so you can check all the alarms and get help. By the way, if you're unsure when you're working with Atlas about what you're looking at or what it means, you can click on a little question mark sign here. I can click on it here if I want to know about Profinet alarms, and up will pop the virtual assistant called Delphi. That's the assistant within Osiris, and it will tell you all the different things about what you're looking. So it's quite helpful, and they really done a nice job with the help. So it's always a click away. So yeah, you can get information about any Profinet or Ethernet IP related problems by clicking here. And then the message recording, this is where you can set up triggers for if there was a Profinet alarm, I want to record or save the message traffic around that alarm. And so you can make up to 100 recordings. You can download them and use those recordings in Wireshark, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar. So these are the types of triggers that you can set up to do that. Okay, let's go back to the dashboard. The notifications is where you can set up your alarms. So this is how you set up your email. And then over here under alarms, this is where you can set up what do you want to be alerted by email for. Is the ping packet response time taking longer than it should? Has a device gone missing from the network? I want to email. So this would be a way to find out by email if someone walked up to your network and plugged in a device and removed it, it would show up as a lost device and you'd get an email about it. You can also send it, as I mentioned earlier, out MQTT, OPC-UA, or turn on the relay. So these are the different kinds of errors. If you scroll down here, here's some Profinet related things that you might want to alarm on. And then when you use your Ether tap analysis for Profinet, these are the alarms, and you can change these thresholds, what would be acceptable jitter for you and your network. And then here's the same things for Ethernet IP. And there will be new stuff here for EtherCAT very soon. All right, and let's go next so here's where you can set up your OPC-UA. Here's the commissioning wizard. The commissioning wizard checks the network, as I mentioned, to see whether you're within spec or not. And I'm not going to run the whole thing, but you can say which protocol are you checking the network for. You can do a quick scan, and then you can do a commissioning scan. So if you're doing a commissioning ones, you complete the checks that don't require an Ether tap. But quick scan, you can do everything. So there you go. I'm not going to do this whole thing because it takes a few minutes, but it gives you a nice report at the end about which are in spec and which aren't. Then you have your Profinet device list. Here are the IP addresses, and these are just the devices that are talking Profinet. And then if I wanted to, there's this Profinet features here. If you want to change these Profinet features, you have to log in as network engineer. So there are different levels of login into Atlas, different types of logins. Right now, I'm logged in as engineer. If you click on the little person up here, you'll see who's logged in. I'm logged in as an engineer. You need different credentials as a network engineer, different password, and that will allow you to do things like flash the LEDs on a device, to change the device name. So this is the device name over here, VP Gate 1, VP Gate 2, etc. You can change that, but it's not recommended. I mean, that's all part of the communication protocol. So you wouldn't normally go in and change your device name unless you were really doing commissioning or other things like that. So, or change device IP addresses. So these are not things you would do just casually. That's why it's kind of locked into this special login. But there's, you can do the same things for Ethernet here as well. And then last but not least, we'll take a look at Combricks here. So I know this is a little out of scope. This is about Profibus stuff, but I'll just show it quickly in case a few of you are interested. So this is the new snap analysis. I have two Combricks connected to this Atlas, and this Atlas then is sending the scope images and other information from these Combricks up to a cloud service provided by Procentec that will analyze the scopes and tell you, for example, what the problem is. So here I see I have an error on this Combrick. So I'm going to click on this, and down here you can see scope measurements. I have two scope modules in my Combricks, and I apologize for those of you who don't know what Combricks are, and we'll try to touch on that later. But the quick thing I wanted to point out here is in this module 2, which is, this is like a repeater in Profibus world, it's telling me there's a missing termination. So if I click on this scope analysis, it's going to actually show me the scope images from this Combricks from module 2. And if you've seen missing termination, you would agree with Snap in this case and say, yes, of course, that's all this up and down error here, this sinus ringing is from a missing termination. So it's telling you here that it says there's a 45% odds of it being a missing termination. If you click on the question mark, it will give you a diagram and show you how to fix a missing termination. You can click on this second screen here and see it says the odds of it being a missing termination are 45%. EMC extra terminations, very little percentage. So really, it's saying this is where your problem is, and it would be right in this case, 100%. Here's where you can get the additional details about your Combricks. So that's all I want to spend on the Combricks, and I guess now I will open it up for questions and answers. Looks like we don't have any open questions. I will stand by for a moment to see if anyone has a question, additional question they'd like to ask. If you want to check out the demo that we just showed you, you can go to atlas.procentec.com and see it. And then Q&A is where we are now. I don't see any questions coming in. These are the folks that you can reach out to on our sales team to help you with your questions. There's myself, Carla, Debbie, Tim, and Vicky, and you see their contact emails there. You can just call the main line and get to any of us, 630-245-1445 here in the US. Thank you all so much for attending. I wish you the warmest of holiday seasons. Stay safe and stay well. And with that, we'll end the webinar.